Seoul International Airport, 6:47 a.m. A man in a $10,000 suit is running. Not walking fast, running. Jacket open, tie loose, security turning heads. And the woman he's chasing? She hasn't looked back once. Not when he called her name. Not when he grabbed her arm. Not even when he dropped to his knees in the middle of the terminal and held up a ring that cost more than most people's houses. She looked down at him, then looked back up, like she didn't recognize him anymore, and kept walking. 48 hours earlier, Kang Min-Jae was standing in front of cameras, microphone in his face, journalists asking one simple question. Is it true you're married? He smiled, straightened his tie, and said, No. What nobody in that room knew was that his wife was watching from the green room, 30 feet away. And she wasn't crying, she wasn't shaking, she wasn't even angry. She was already counting her steps to the exit. Because this wasn't the first time Kang Min-Jae erased her. It was just the last. And what Kang Min-Jae didn't know was that she had already planned exactly how this would end. Let's go back further. Not 48 hours. Further. 14 months earlier. Seoul private residence, Gangnam District. The apartment had floor-to-ceiling windows, the kind that made you feel like the city belonged to you. Zariah Blake had learned to love those windows. She had learned to love a lot of things about this life. The quiet mornings, the way he made coffee without being asked, the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching, like she was the only thing in the room worth looking at. She had learned to love him completely, which is exactly why what came next destroyed her in ways she never showed anyone. It started small.
The way these things always do. His phone face down on the table, a dinner canceled last minute, a name she didn't recognize appearing twice in his calendar. Seiya Hana. She didn't ask. Not because she was afraid of the answer, because she already knew how men like Kang Min-Jae operated. She had watched her mother navigate a man exactly like that for 17 years. So Zariah watched and waited and filed everything away. The first public event she attended as his wife was a charity gala, black tie, downtown Seoul, 200 of Korea's most powerful people in one room. Kang Min-Jae introduced her to exactly 3 people that night, his driver, his assistant, and a business partner who was too drunk to remember her name by morning. Everyone else? She was just the woman beside him. No name, no introduction, no acknowledgement. She had worn a midnight blue dress that night, one he had chosen himself, one he had zipped up slowly that evening, hands careful, lips on her shoulder, voice low. You are everything, Zariah. She remembered thinking, then why won't you say my name out loud? She didn't say it, not that night. That was the first time she understood he wasn't hiding her by accident. 3 months into the marriage, she met his mother, once. Jung Suk-hee arrived at the apartment unannounced on a Tuesday morning. Expensive coat, perfect posture, eyes that moved across Zariah in under 2 seconds like she was assessing something she had already decided to reject. She spoke in Korean, the entire visit, 45 minutes, not a single word directed at Zariah. Kang Min-Jae translated nothing. When his mother left, he poured himself a drink, stood by the window, didn't speak for a long time. Then, she just needs time. Zariah looked at him steadily. How much time, Min-Jae? He didn't answer. He took a slow sip of his drink instead, and in that silence, Zariah learned something about her husband that no conversation could have taught her. When Kang Min-Jae didn't want to answer a question, he simply didn't. And nobody pushed him. Nobody. 6 months into the marriage, Kang Min-Jae's company was closing the largest acquisition in its history, KM Global absorbing Sheen Industries, 40 billion won on the table, shareholders watching every move, press circling like they always do when that much money is involved. Zariah understood the deal mattered. She supported him through the late nights, the canceled plans, the version of him that came home exhausted and said nothing but needed her present anyway. She was there for all of it. What she didn't know was that somewhere inside that deal was a decision that had already been made about her, without her knowledge, without her consent, and without a single conversation. She found out on a Tuesday evening. He was in the shower, his laptop open on the kitchen counter. She wasn't looking for anything. She was checking a restaurant reservation he had asked her to confirm. But the document on the screen wasn't a reservation. It was a contract. Section 14, subsection C. The acquiring party confirms no undisclosed personal or contractual obligations exist that may affect public perception or shareholder confidence in the leadership of KM Global. She read it once, then again. Then she scrolled down to the email thread beneath it. His lawyer, his PR director, and one name she had seen before, Se-Hwan-Ah. The email was dated 4 months ago, 3 months before the press conference, 1 month after their wedding. She stood in that kitchen without moving. The shower was still running. The city outside the window was doing what it always did, glittering, indifferent, unbothered. And Zariah understood for the first time the full shape of what she was standing inside. This wasn't a man trapped between love and pressure. This was a man who looked at everything he had, including her, and made a very deliberate choice. She closed the laptop, walked back to the window, and stood there until she heard the shower turn off. When he came out, she handed him his coffee, smiled, asked about his day, and never said a word about what she had read. Not that night, not ever, because Zariah Blake didn't confront. She prepared. We still have 48 hours to get through before that airport, and what happens inside those 48 hours is the part of this story that changes everything. Because what Zariah had planned wasn't just leaving. Zariah Blake didn't walk away empty. She walked away with a plan. And by the time Kang Min-Jae understands it, it will already be too late. Hit subscribe now. It helps bring more powerful stories like this to you. And tell me where you're watching from. Let me know who's riding with Zariah. The morning of the press conference, Zariah woke up at 5 a.m. Not because she couldn't sleep, because she had things to do. She made coffee, opened her laptop, and spent 40 minutes reviewing a document that had nothing to do with Kang Min-Jae's company. It had everything to do with hers. 3 months earlier, quietly, without announcement, Zariah Blake had incorporated a business, not in Seoul, in New York, a consulting firm. Small, legitimate, built entirely on the network she had spent 14 months cultivating while standing 3 steps behind her husband at events where nobody knew her name. Turns out, when people don't see you as a threat, they talk freely, and Zariah had been listening to every word. She had collected contacts, opportunities, and relationships that Kang Min-Jae's own team had spent years trying to access, all while holding his coat at the door. She got dressed that morning with the kind of calm that only comes from certainty. Black blazer,
simple earrings, hair back. She looked at herself in the mirror for exactly 3 seconds. Then she picked up her phone and sent one message. Not to him, to her lawyer in New York. File it today. 2 words.
That was all it took to begin the end of a marriage Kang Min-Jae still thought was intact. She arrived at the press conference venue at 9 a.m. His team had arranged a green room for her, a courtesy, they called it, a comfortable place to wait while he handled business. She had smiled and said thank you. She knew exactly what the green room was. It was the place they put things they didn't want the cameras to see. The press conference started at 10. She watched it on a monitor mounted on the green room wall. Kang Min-Jae walked out looking exactly like what he was. Powerful, composed, the kind of man a room reorganizes itself around. He answered the first 4 questions with the precision of someone who had rehearsed every word. Acquisitions, market expansion, shareholder confidence, future projections. Then the 5th question came, from a journalist in the 3rd row. Young woman, notepad in hand, voice steady and clear. Mr. Kang, there have been reports suggesting you were recently married. Can you confirm or deny? The room shifted, not dramatically, just slightly, the way a room does when someone asks the question everyone was thinking but nobody expected out loud. Kang Min-Jae didn't miss a beat. He smiled, adjusted the microphone slightly, and said, I'm not sure where that report originated, but no, I'm not married. Not, I prefer to keep my personal life private. Not, that's not something I'll be addressing today. No, he said no, cleanly, directly, without hesitation, like the word cost him nothing. In the green room, Zariah watched his mouth form that single syllable and felt something she hadn't expected. Not pain, relief, because the last piece of uncertainty she had been carrying, the small, stubborn part of her that had held on to the possibility that she was wrong about him, died quietly in that moment. She wasn't wrong. She had never been wrong. She set down her coffee cup, uncrossed her legs, and reached into her bag for her phone. She had one more call to make. His name was David Shin. Not a lawyer, not a friend, a journalist. Senior correspondent for one of South Korea's largest financial publications. She had met him 14 months ago, at the 3rd event she had ever attended as Kang Min-Jae's invisible companion. He had been the only person in the room that night who had introduced himself to her directly, asked her name, remembered it, asked what she did. She had given him a vague answer then. She had a much more specific one now. David? Zariah, I've been waiting for your call. It's time. A pause on the line. Everything we discussed? Everything. Another pause. This goes live in 48 hours. I know, she said. Are you sure? She looked at the monitor. Kang Min-Jae was still at the podium, still smiling, still performing the version of himself that had no wife. I've never been more sure of anything, she said, and ended the call. She stayed in the green room for another 20 minutes after the press conference ended, not because she was upset, because she was waiting. She knew he would come to find her. They always came to find her. He knocked twice before opening the door. Jacket still perfectly pressed, that same composed expression he wore like armor. Hey. Hey, she said. He closed the door behind him, looked at her carefully, the way he always did when he was trying to read her.
You watched? Yes. A beat. Zariah, you're hungry, she said, standing up and reaching for her bag. There's a restaurant 2 blocks from here. You mentioned it last week. He blinked. Yes, but we should probably talk about after lunch, she said simply,
and walked past him to the door. That was the thing about Zariah that undid him every time. She never gave him the fight he was bracing for. She gave him normalcy, warmth, the version of her that made him feel like everything was fine. And he took it every single time because it was easier than the alternative. Because somewhere deep in the part of him that knew exactly what he had done, he was relieved she wasn't pushing. He told himself it meant she understood. He told himself it meant she was okay. He was telling himself a story. Lunch was quiet. She asked about the acquisition timeline. He talked about shareholder meetings. She laughed at something he said about his CFO. To anyone watching, they looked like a couple having a perfectly ordinary afternoon. Nobody at that restaurant would have guessed that one of them had spent the morning setting fire to everything the other had built. Slowly, carefully, without a single visible flame. That evening, back at the apartment, he finally tried to have the conversation. He sat across from her in the living room, elbows on his knees, the posture of a man who had rehearsed something. About today. Min-Jae. Her voice was quiet, not angry, not cold, just final. I don't need an explanation. He looked at her. Zariah, the deal, the timing, there are things I couldn't. I said I don't need one. The room went still. He searched her face for the thing he always found there. Patience, understanding, the version of her that waited. It wasn't there. Something else was. Something he couldn't name. Something that looked like a woman who had already arrived somewhere he hadn't reached yet. Are you okay? He asked. She looked at him for a long moment and smiled. The kind of smile that in 14 months he had never learned to read correctly. I'm fine, Min-Jae. She stood up, kissed him on the forehead, and went to bed. He sat in that living room alone for a long time, telling himself the same story. She understood. She was okay. After the deal closed, he would fix everything. He would explain. He would make it right. He had 48 hours. What he didn't know was that in 48 hours, he would be on his knees in an airport, and she would already be gone in every way that mattered. Because in 48 hours, everything Kang Min-Jae built is about to start falling apart, and he has no idea it's already begun. If you're not subscribed yet, do it now. It helps us keep stories like this coming. And tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your city below. I'm reading every comment.
The next morning, Zariah woke up at 5 a.m. again. Same time, same quiet, same coffee. But this morning was different, because this was the last morning she would wake up in this apartment. She didn't rush. She didn't panic. She moved through the space the way you move through something you have already said goodbye to in your mind. Slowly, deliberately, like she was memorizing it one last time, not because she would miss it, but because she believed in finishing things properly. She had one bag, not because she couldn't take more, because she had decided months ago that she was leaving this life exactly the way she had entered it, with nothing that belonged to him. The clothes in that closet, the jewelry in that drawer, the life she had built inside these walls, none of it was coming with her. She was leaving with what she had arrived with, herself. By 6 a.m., the bag was by the door. She made 2 cups of coffee, set his on the counter the way she always did, then sat at the kitchen table and opened her laptop one final time. There was an email waiting from David Shin. "It's live." 2 words. She closed the laptop, picked up her coffee, and waited for the sound of his alarm. It went off at 6:15. She heard him move through the bedroom, the bathroom, the familiar sounds of a man who had no idea his entire world had shifted overnight. He came into the kitchen at 6:31, hair slightly damp, shirt half-buttoned, reached for his coffee without looking up, took a sip, then reached for his phone. She watched his face. That was the moment she had been waiting for. Not the press conference, not the green room, not the conversation the night before. This moment, right here. His thumb moving across the screen, his eyes scanning, the slight furrow of his brow as he registered something unexpected.
Then, the stillness. The particular kind of stillness that falls over a person when they read something that rearranges their entire understanding of the last 14 months. He looked up slowly. Zariah. His voice was different. Not the composed, controlled voice she had lived with. Something underneath it had cracked. "What is this?" She looked at him calmly. "What does it say?" He turned the phone toward her. The headline was clean and precise. KM Global CEO Kang Min-Jae, secret marriage to American consultant revealed, exclusive documents inside. David Shin's byline. Her name. Their marriage certificate. Section 14, subsection C. And 3 photographs from events she had attended, standing exactly 3 steps behind her husband, now identified, named, and contextualized in devastating detail. She had given David everything, every document, every date, every erasure, told with facts, not emotion, the most dangerous kind of story. Kang Min-Jae set the phone down on the counter very carefully, the way you set something down when your hands are not fully steady. "You did this." Not a question. "Yes," she said. "Zariah." "The acquisition closes in 6 hours," she said. "I know the timeline. I was careful." He stared at her. "You were careful." The article contains no information that affects the deal itself, only information about how you chose to handle our marriage. That was intentional. He looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Maybe he was. "Why?" he said. And for the first time, the composed, powerful, controlled Kang Min-Jae looked genuinely lost, not angry, lost. "Because," Zariah said quietly, "you told the world I didn't exist. I just told them I did." The silence that followed was the longest of their marriage.
He moved to the window, stood there with his back to her. She watched him process it, the way a man processes something he cannot negotiate his way out of, with his jaw tight and his hands still, and his mind racing through every possible exit. There was none. She had made sure of that. "My mother," he said finally. Not an excuse, almost a confession. She said if the marriage became public before the deal closed, Shin's family would pull out. They're traditional, conservative, a foreign wife. She said it would. "I know what she said," Zariah interrupted gently. He turned. "Then you understand." "I understand that you agreed with her." The words landed quietly, but they landed. He opened his mouth, closed it, because the thing about a true statement delivered without anger is that there is absolutely nothing you can say to move it. That's not Min-Jae. Her voice was not unkind. There were 100 moments between our wedding and that press conference where you could have chosen differently.
I watched you have every single one of them." She stood up. "You didn't choose wrong because you were pressured. You chose wrong because it was easier. And you kept choosing it because I kept letting you." She picked up her bag from by the door. "I'm not letting you anymore." He crossed the room in 3 steps. "Zariah, wait, just wait." His hand on her arm, not aggressive, desperate. The grip of a man who has just understood fully, completely, too late, exactly what he is losing. "I'll fix it," he said. "The article is already out, I know that, but I will stand in front of every camera and I will call your name. I will call it what it is. I will—" "I know you will," she said. He stopped. "You will do all of that," she continued, "and it will be real and it will matter to you." She looked at him, and there was nothing cold in her eyes, just honesty, the unbearable kind. "But you'll be doing it for you, not for me, because I already know who you are when the pressure is on. I watched you for 14 months. She removed his hand from her arm, gently. "I deserve someone who knows who I am when there is no pressure at all." He stood in the doorway of his own apartment, watching her walk toward the elevator. And for the first time in his adult life, Kang Min-Jae had nothing to say. No strategy, no negotiation, no version of events he could reframe. Just a woman walking away from him with one bag, and a posture that said she had already built something on the other side of this door that didn't include him. The elevator opened. She stepped in, turned around, and looked at him one final time. Not with hatred, not with tears, with a kind of clarity that only comes after a very long time of knowing something and finally allowing yourself to act on it. The doors closed. He called her 17 times before she reached the lobby. She answered none of them. By the time he made it downstairs, she was already in a car. By the time the car reached the highway, his phone was ringing from every direction. His PR team, his lawyer, his board. And somewhere underneath all of it, one call he kept declining. His mother. He drove to the airport himself. No driver, no assistant, no team. Just him and the version of himself he had been hiding underneath the suit and the composure and the carefully managed public image. The version that knew, from the moment he read that headline, that he had made the worst mistake of his life. Not the press conference, not the clause, not the silence. The mistake was simpler than all of that. He had looked at a woman who would have walked through fire for him and treated her like a liability. He parked the car badly, ran through the terminal entrance, and that is where we came in. Seoul International Airport, 6:47 a.m. A man in a $10,000 suit, running.
Because what happens next isn't closure, it's consequences. And Kang Min-Jae is not ready for them. If you're not subscribed yet, do it now. It helps us bring stories like this to life for you. And tell me, where are you watching from? I'm reading every comment. She heard him before she saw him. Not his voice. The sound of people moving out of the way. That particular shift in a crowd when someone is cutting through it with too much urgency to be polite. She didn't turn around. She already knew. Gate 47 was 3 minutes ahead of her. She had calculated the walk twice yesterday, timed it, factored in the morning crowd. Zariah Blake did not leave things to chance. Not anymore. Zariah. His voice, closer than she expected. She kept walking. Zariah, please.
The word please from Kang Min-Jae's mouth was so foreign, so structurally wrong, that the couple walking ahead of her actually turned around. She didn't. She felt his hand close around her arm, the same hand she had removed from her arm 40 minutes ago in the apartment doorway. She stopped. Not because the grip stopped her, because she had decided, long before this moment, exactly how this would go. She turned around slowly. He looked like a man who had been dismantled. The suit was the same, expensive, pressed, but the jacket was open and the tie was gone, and his hair was slightly wrong, and his eyes were the part that almost moved her. Almost. "Don't get on that plane," he said. Not a request, not quite a command, something broken in between. "Min-Jae, I know what I did. I know all of it. And I am standing here telling you in front of every person in this terminal that I was wrong." His voice cracked slightly on the last word. She noticed. She said nothing. "I chose wrong," he continued. "Every time. I know that. My mother, the deal, the press conference. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I would fix it after. I kept telling myself that."
He took a step closer. But the truth is, he stopped, looked at the floor for 1 second, then back up at her. "The truth is, I was afraid. Not of my mother, not of the deal falling apart." His jaw tightened. "I was afraid of what it meant. To stand in front of the world and say, 'This woman is mine and I am hers.' Because that kind of love, the real kind, it makes you vulnerable in ways that a boardroom never does. And I didn't know how to be that. I didn't know how to be that kind of exposed." The terminal moved around them. Announcements overhead. Footsteps. Rolling luggage. None of it touched the small, devastated space between them. "He hid you," he said quietly. "And I told myself you understood. And every time you didn't push, I used your grace as permission." He reached into his jacket pocket and held out the ring. Not dramatically, just open palm, ring resting in the center. His arm extended toward her like a man offering the only thing he had left. "I'm not asking you to forget any of it. I'm asking you to let me prove that I know the difference now between what I was and what I should have been." The terminal moved around them. The ring caught the airport light. Zariah looked at it, then at him. There was a version of this moment, the version she had imagined in the early months of their marriage, where this speech would have undone her. Where those words, honest, raw, perfectly delivered, would have been enough. She had loved him enough for that version to exist. She knew that. She wasn't pretending otherwise. But love, she had learned, is not the same thing as wisdom, and wisdom was telling her something his words could not override. She had watched this man choose wrong 17 times. Not once, not twice. 17 documented moments she had filed away, the way her father taught her, where he had looked at the easier path and taken it. A speech in the airport, however honest, however broken, was not 17 moments. It was one. She reached out and closed his fingers around the ring, gently, her hand over his fist for just a moment. "I believe you," she said. He looked up. Something desperate and hopeful crossed his face simultaneously. "I believe that you mean every word of what you just said. I believe that you're standing here and you're terrified and you're telling the truth." She withdrew her hand. "But Min-Jae, I watched you tell the truth to yourself 100 times in that apartment. In your eyes. In the way you looked at me after events where you hadn't introduced me to a single person. You knew. You always knew."
Her voice didn't waver. The problem was never that you didn't know right from wrong. The problem was that knowing wasn't enough to make you choose differently. She picked up her bag. One hard moment doesn't rewrite 14 months of easy ones. He stood there, ring in his closed fist, eyes wet in a way she had never seen in 14 months of marriage. "So that's it," he said. Not angry, just a man arriving at the full weight of a consequence he had built brick by brick without realizing it. Zariah. Her name in his mouth, the way he said it when it was just the two of them, soft and specific and like it meant something beyond the letters, landed exactly the way he intended it to. She felt it. She let herself feel it. And then she let it go. "Take care of yourself, Min-Jae." She turned, walked the final 3 minutes to gate 47, handed over her boarding pass, didn't look back. Not once. Flight OZ-211 departed Seoul at 7:22 a.m. Zariah Blake sat in her seat, window side, watched the city pull away beneath her. Seoul in the early morning looked like something out of a dream, all light and density and impossible scale. She had arrived in this city with a love she thought was unbreakable. She was leaving with something harder to name, but more valuable: the absolute certainty of who she was. Her phone showed 41 missed calls. She turned it off.
Ordered water. Opened her laptop. There was a message from her lawyer in New York. "Office is ready. Team is waiting. Welcome back." She read it twice. Smiled, not the careful, unreadable smile she had worn for 14 months, but the real one, the one that belonged only to her. Somewhere below, in a terminal where the announcements kept moving and the crowds kept flowing, Kang Min-Jae stood at the window of Gate 47, watching a plane lift into the sky, ring still in his closed fist. His PR team was calling, his board was calling, his mother was calling. He declined every one and stood there until the plane was nothing but a pale line dissolving into the clouds. Later, much later, people would ask him what happened to his marriage. He always gave the same answer, not a long one, just the truth. "I had something rare, and I treated it like it would wait forever." He never said her name in interviews, not because he was hiding her, because some things, once broken, deserved to be protected from the people who broke them. That was the only thing he ever did right. And Zariah Blake? She built what she had planned, quietly, methodically, the way her father had taught her. She never spoke publicly about the marriage, never gave an interview, never explained herself to anyone who hadn't earned the explanation. She just lived, fully, on her own terms, in her own name, the way she should have been living all along. There is one thing, though, one thing nobody knew. On the morning her company opened its New York office, a single arrangement of flowers arrived at reception. No card, no name, just white peonies, her favorite. She stood at the reception desk and looked at them for a long moment. Then she told her assistant to put them in the conference room and went back to work. Some doors, even the ones you close yourself, leave a draft. The wisdom is in knowing the difference between a draft and a reason to open it again. Zariah Blake always knew the difference. That is her story. And now you know all of it. And that is her story. Not about revenge, not about heartbreak, about knowing your worth and acting on it. If this story stayed with you, tell me the moment that hit you the hardest, and tell me where you're watching from. I want to know who was here for this. And if you're not subscribed yet, do it now. It helps us bring more stories like this to life.